Magandang tanghali, Pilipinas, at pati na rin sa lahat ng mga nanonood sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo. Magandang umaga o magandang gabi kung saan man po kayo naroroon. Kamusta po kayong lahat? Thank you for joining us today to unpack the recently concluded Philippine national elections. We will be taking a deep dive into the prediction models and determine whether or not they have established trends and influenced mindsets on the actual vote. People will be talking, analyzing, and dissecting this presidential elections 2022 for years to come. Was Google Trends a better predictor than the presidential surveys? Did the Kalye surveys, presidential cup surveys, or social media polls successfully get the pulse of the masses? Were the trending social media hashtags a better gauge for who's leading than the campaign rally body counts with drone shots? Welcome po sa inyong lahat to the 10th and final webinar of the National Forum on Communication and Democracy Philippine Elections 2022, so aptly named ANYARE, Post-Election Analysis. I'm Ces Orenia Drilon. I will be your host and moderator for today's program, which may also be viewed via live streaming on YouTube at the TVUP channel, as well as on the TVUP and the Philippines Communication Society Facebook pages. We will also have some live tweeting, so please use hashtag PCS Forum Series with your posts. And before we begin, let's acknowledge the following. We'd like to thank the University of the Philippines System, the Office of the Vice President for Public Affairs, the Philippines Communication Society, UP Information Technology Development Center or ITDC, TVUP, the Internet Television Network of the University of the Philippines, and everyone who has helped make this forum series possible. And because we have many faculty and students watching us today, PCS members will be receiving a certificate of attendance as a benefit of their PCS membership. If you have not applied for or renewed your membership yet, this is your chance to be part of the premier organization that represents the communication discipline to the Philippine Social Science Council. The online membership form is available on the PCS website, philcomsoc.org/membership. And because this is a national forum on communication and democracy, we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. We will be using Mentimeter so that our viewers on Facebook and YouTube will also be able to participate. We encourage everyone to participate in our mini quiz. Madali lang po ito, sali na po kayo. Your answers will be discussed during our panel discussion later on, and you'll also see how the other viewers have answered. Again, for all our viewers, including those on Facebook, please open your browser and go to menti.com and fill in the code that you're seeing on screen right now. The code is 44534610, or simply scan the QR code on your screen. Okay, I know that everyone is excited to get the show going, so to set the tone of ANYARE, post-election analysis, let's hear a few words from the Dean of the Institute of Arts and Sciences of the Far Eastern University. Friends, give a warm welcome to Dr. Rowena C. Reyes.
Dr. Elena.
Gandang
hapon. Dr. Elena Pernia, PCS board members, our resource speakers, Prof. ANYARE Barrios, Dr. Rachel Khan, my friend Roberto Dicdao Jr., our beautiful moderator, Ces Orenia Drilon, media practitioners, dear faculty and students from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Magandang tanghali. ANYARE. We are seeing too many broken-hearted family members, friends, colleagues, and students. And so I ask, how do you mend a broken heart? Thank you for inviting me to the National Forum on Communication and Democracy Philippine Elections 2022. The Institute of Arts and Sciences of the Far Eastern University is one with the Philippines Communication Society in the quest to analyze, decode, and define further the elements and components of an election so that the strength of our democracy and our democratic institutions are protected and promoted further, and perhaps help heal some hearts wanting answers. The national election 2 days ago showed how reforms are badly needed, even if it signaled that the Philippines is still committed to the form of government that the nation has. Our participation in the election marks our desire to find leaders among ourselves who embody our collective dreams and aspirations. We just hope that the winners will stand by the campaign promises to uplift the people and the nation. We are in dire need of role models and authentic leaders. However, the democratic practice of finding leaders should not be romanticized and idealized. Instead, we need to provide spaces where we can examine the factors that led to the election of our national and local leaders. Today's National Forum and post-election analysis will be able to provide us with descriptions and discussions on what happened before, during, and days after the 2022 national election. We are here to listen and engage with experts regarding the communicative modes of predicting election poll results. Do we still trust surveys and exit polls? What forms of surveys can capture the sentiments of the Filipinos? Do we conduct surveys in all their forms, sizes? Are Google Trends worthy of contesting or backing up survey results? The insights of the panel members will be able to contribute to the critical discussion that is not only supposed to be examined among communication and media practitioners. We need the conversation inside academic halls, in family affairs, and in friend group chats. The series of roundtable discussions in the past months have been an exciting and timely collection of fora that investigated and pinned down the role of communication in media in Philippine politics. The series enabled the country to see that elections are equal concerns of economists, political scientists, communication and media scholars, and other social scientists. As a communication scholar, I am intrigued and passionate about analyzing social media campaigns and how these relate to traditional political campaigns. Obviously, now we are seeing a new formula in packaging the leader who will represent our country's dreams and aspirations. To quote Vicky Morales, do we just need a popular name to win in elections despite having no platforms? I hope that our invited speakers will deal with these questions this noon. As an academic leader, I look forward to the insights of our colleagues and experts when it comes to post-elections. Perhaps a thorough comprehension about political communication is a much-needed skill that all our students must have to protect and advance our democracy. Again, welcome to the National Forum on Communication and Democracy, and thank you so much for the invitation, PCS family. Now, fortified by FEU's DEPCOM's may alam, may pakialam, we want to understand so we can continue what some of us have already started, a social movement. Thank you everyone who made today happen.
Thank you so much for your very inspiring message and for setting the tone for today's discussion, Dean Rowena Reyes of the FEU Institute of Arts and Sciences. How do you mend a broken heart? Yan talaga ang tanong kahit ng isang magulang katulad ko. And my answer was for my son to join and watch this discussion. You may now start answering your Mentimeter poll on your screen. Simply go again, friends, menti.com. Fill in the code that you see on your screen. And itong unang tanong, paano mo ilalarawan ang Philippine National Elections 2022? For this question, you may put in 3 words for our word cloud. You will see that the words will increase in size the more times this word is mentioned by our viewers in the Mentimeter poll. Ayan, we see some answers already coming in. Bring back Marcos to jail. Ay, ang laki nun na. Okay, yun ang nakita kong malaki. O sige, we'll leave the Mentimeter poll open for you as we go along with the program. I-reveal natin later ang inyong mga kasagutan later with our speakers. The second question on the next page, Ano sa palagay ninyo ang accurate method sa pag-predict ng election poll results? A. Pre-election surveys. B. Exit polls. C. Google Trends. D. CUP survey. E. Kalye survey. F. Intercept survey. G. Drone shots. H. Campaign rally attendance. I. Social media hashtags. At J. Social media posts. Ayan. So, alam ko the chat box is so busy while our viewers are putting in their answers. Maraming nagsabi, nag-check-in kung saan sila naroroon. I saw somebody from Beijing, merong copies all over the Philippines po, Luzon to Mindanao, nandyan ang ating mga participants at meron din sa ibang bansa. Okay. So babalikan po natin please do participate in this Mentimeter fun quiz. I know it's not going to be just fun because it will be it will indicate how we all feel about the past political exercise. Ayan. So as we're hearing from our viewers, let's now hear it naman from the street, the word on the street with a person on the street interview with TV UP.
Tingin ko naman patas siya. Fair and square.
Malinis, I don't believe. Marami naman tayo nakikitang anomalies sa numbers ng results.
If you just try to analyze the numbers, it really does not make sense. Kasi nga parang walang variability, all are consistent, and basically why is it so perfect? And dun ka talaga magdududa.
May mga questions din in the back of my head na what if talagang totoo natalo? How do we move on? Yun, parang being under a Marcos administration. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought na babalik tayo dito. When history has clearly told us ano yung nangyari before.
Minsan, yung iboboto mo, hindi siya yung mananalo. So, tanggapin na lang natin kung sino yung majority na pinili ng Pilipinas.
Ang Pilipino is pinipili nila hindi doon sa kung sino yung magaling or sobrang daming kung ano-ano nagawa, basta na kahit anong dami mo nang nagawa ang pinipili pa rin nila is kung sino and kanino sila makaka-relate.
How can you say maano siya sa mga mahihirap when his whole life he was living a lavish lifestyle? I don't think there's a genuine connection.
If you check the marketing strategy of the BBM camp, ang target talaga nila yung mga masa, di ba? Yung mga class D, yung mga class E.
Yung halos lahat sila below middle class is BBM talaga sinusuportahan.
The fact that they can make him look like he's part of he has a genuine connection with the lower income class shows how good of a branding the team did, not less of what Bongbong really is.
Let's hope for the best, and yun nga, I think ang pinaka magkakaroon ng change sa bansa natin is hindi lang itong term ni President Marcos, but kailangan magkaroon ng reforms dun sana malaman din ng mga tao kung ano yung mga requirements pa kasi kailangan magkaroon ng reforms sa constitution natin.
Let's always ask for accountability, and that's very, very important in this political climate.
Kasi at the end of the day, kung sinong sinusuportahan mo, hindi naman yung tao yung mananalo. Hindi naman si Bongbong or si Lenny yung mananalo. It should be the Filipinos that should win, not one candidate.
Thank you very much, TVUP, for giving us the pulse of the people through the person on the street interview. So insightful views from the youth. And to start off, simulan na po natin. Let me introduce our distinguished panel of experts for our roundtable discussion on Anyare, post-election results. You know, our first speaker was supposed to have been the founder and managing director of Strat-Based Group and the president of Strat-Based Space ADR Institute Professor Victor Andres Manhit. Unfortunately po, I'm so sorry to tell you, to break the news to you that his father passed away this morning. And we do, please, I'd like to invite you to say a silent prayer for the repose of his father's soul. So in his stead, we have Professor Erniel Barrios of the UP School of Statistics. Magandang hapon po sa inyo, Professor Barrios. And of course, next, we are honored to have with us on the panel the Associate Dean of the College of Mass Communication in UP Diliman. She is a professor with the Department of Journalism and coordinator of Check.ph, which is a collaborative fact-checking project for the 2022 presidential elections. Check.ph is an initiative of the academe, media, and civil society to counter disinformation and provide the public with verified information. Please welcome to your screens, Dr. Rachel E. Khan. Magandang hapon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ces. Good afternoon, everyone.
And Doc Barrios, are you there? Hindi po namin narinig ang inyong... Ayan, good afternoon. Okay, and rounding up the panel, it is my pleasure to introduce the chairman of the Kapisanan ng mga Broadcaster ng Pilipinas, or KBP. The KBP organized the Panata sa Bayan, the KBP Presidential Candidates Forum in February, as well as partnered with the COMELEC for the Pilipinas Forum 2022 in May. Please welcome to our webinar, the President of the Manila Broadcasting Company, Ruperto Nicdao Jr. Magandang hapon po sa inyo, June.
Good afternoon, Ces, and good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for being part of this roundtable discussion where we examine how close were the prediction models to the outcome of the elections. Okay, simulan muna natin yung person on the street interview that we just played. May I ask for... Oh, before we begin with that, your reaction to the man on the street interviews, let's bring to the screen yung slides muna ni Professor Manhit, ni Dr. Manhit, para makita rin naman nating lahat kahit wala siya dito. Okay, there are two slides that we'd like to share with you from the presentation of Dr. Manhit. Okay, the first one is, you can see on your screen, presidential candidate who best fits selected criteria. Okay, nakikita nyo naman ang naging resulta nitong sa Pulse Asia. Ang scores ng ni Bongbong Marcos, ni Leni Robredo, ni Isko, ni Manny Pacquiao, ni Lacson. Okay, shall we also share the second slide? Oops, ang daming slide. Okay, eto. Senator Bongbong Marcos's strong narratives on social media. Okay, we'd give you a moment to read through this slide. Okay, any comments from our distinguished panel? Sinong gustong magbuena mano? June?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I can start off, no? First, I'd like to, this is my observation muna, no? And I think it kind of relates to some of the comments mentioned earlier about the fact that the Bongbong campaign, I think, ran a better campaign in the sense that they actually sold him like selling a brand. They addressed the pain points of what the population did. And I think with the help of Cambridge Analytica, alam natin, they were helped by Cambridge Analytica. No? I think they were able to come up with a great strategy. They made, obviously, research on what the pain points are and what the people, what the USP is, or the unique selling proposition should be for Bongbong. And that's unity. So they came up, I think they did extensive research. And I think what they did was to identify ang kailangan ng tao ngayon, unity is parang yun ang overall. In fact, if you look at the branding, it's unity, it's all about unity, no? That's the first point, no? That they did a good they did a good selling of a brand, which is the brand of unity. Pangalawa, I think we should also point out that the Duterte name is still a very popular name. We know that the President Duterte still has a very high approval rating and so forth. No, so let me just point this out. Bongbong would not have won if Sara ran as president. I think we know that. In our company, we actually ran several surveys. We ran 4 surveys. The first one was done in August, and at that time, Sara was still running. And the results were Sara would have won. Sara was, let me see, she was doing about 28%. Bongbong was doing 17 or 18%. Lenny was 8.3. Isko was 11.2. Manny Pacquiao was 10. And Ping was only 3.3. So if Sara ran, she would have won. So I think the biggest strategy that this campaign did was to unite the forces of Duterte's and the Marcoses. Kasi pagdating nung second survey namin, which is done in December, nag-unite na sila doon. What happened is that the numbers of Bongbong and Sara added up. It became 50%. It was adding up what the August surveys was. So I think that's the biggest thing, no? And that's the, we call the billion peso question. Okay. In fact, even the president was wondering, why the heck is my daughter stepping down? She's going to win this election, and I think she would have won the elections had she ran, because the name is still very popular, and I think that's shown by all the results. No, so nung umatras si Sara, ang nangyari lang, nag-add lang yung numbers. The followers of Bongbong added up to Sara's numbers, and the followers of Sara added up to Bongbong's numbers. So you just add those numbers. It may be simplistic, but I think that's what happened. I think that's the biggest strategy na pinag-usapan nila. Pag naglaban tayo dito, there's a chance na mahati yung boto natin, because they're the populist. The two of them are the populist candidates, di ba? So okay. Parang you're dividing the votes of the populist candidates if they ran against each other. And I think the other candidates might have a chance, because if you look at it, Lenny was searching. I can explain that a little later. No, ang comment ko lang pala, I just want to comment yung about the masyadong predictable and all that. As you know, KVP and the PPCRBs are running this count, no, the electronic count. It's not true. Sorry, medyo ano lang yan. That's all conspiracy theory, because we were looking at the numbers. They're not consistent. It was like Bong was doing 70% and bababa siya ng ano. It's not true. So I voted for a candidate that didn't win, and I'm sorry. All these conspiracy theorists na masyadong consistent yung 68-32. Hindi po totoo yun. I'm sorry. We were looking at the numbers.
Sige, tanungin natin yung mga statistician mamaya, June. Sige. Okay. Rachel, you want to weigh in? Reaction to the graphs and the man on the street and the pulse of the people. Yes.
Yeah. I generally agree with what June had said with regards to the effective campaign. In fact, it was a very effective public relations campaign, which was boosted also by the effective use of disinformation. So between a very good branding and strategic public relations, then you had the informal but also very effective use of disinformation strategies. It's no wonder they're able to clinch it, no, in terms of the numbers of the voters. Plus the fact, that's why we see also a very big disconnect. As the slides showed us, they're looking for the least corrupt candidate, and then you have Bongbong Marcos as the highest percentage. So I think that shows really the effectivity of the disinformation campaign, because of the disconnect between the values which the people were looking for, which I think we all agree with the values that they were looking for, right? I mean, there's no disagreement there. The problem was the translation of these values into the who fits it most. And I think that's where disinformation comes in.
Okay. Dr. Barrios, perhaps my question for you, let's go na to the meat of the topic. Yung maganda bang naging batting average ng mga pre-election surveys kumpara sa resulta ng eleksyon?
Maganda at hindi. Maganda to some extent, medyo
Mixed,
malapit, pero yung iba hindi rin. Pero meron akong a comment doon sa slides kanina na pinag-uusapan natin. Sa palagay ko, their side, the side of the unit team, use the most sophisticated research strategy that is ever imagined in the research community. They utilized the data mining strategy that invested on the big data that was generated by the social media. The social media, Facebook, Twitter, are very rich source of information. From there, there are some mechanisms that can be used to extract insights. And from here, they were able to determine the aspirations of every Filipino on how they envision their president would be. And then, coupled with misinformation, disinformation campaign, and taint one candidate to be the opposite of what the citizen aspire, and the other one painted nicely through effective means like TikTok and so on. And that's how they actually won the election.
Okay.
The main topic I'll be talking about later on is the 68-32% ratio, Sir June. I'll talk about it.
Yes, we'd like to hear your views being, from the UP School of Statistics. But going back to what you said, Professor Barrios, hindi ba ginawa ng Lenny Campion yung pag-mine ng big data based on what you saw, the way they communicated their candidates, or the way they projected Lenny and Kiko? Sa tingin nyo, hindi kulang ang research?
Apparently, their team was able to invest long time ago, even before the campaign period. They already invested, and as Sir June noted, they invested on Cambridge Analytica, which has now closed. They had among the best data scientists in the world. And we have very good data scientists here in the Philippines, but unfortunately, it was only in October that VP Lenny decided to run. So the concerted effort was a little bit too late.
Right.
It would have started a year ago.
Too late.
It was too late.
Agree. Medyo huli na nang nagsimula ang oposisyon, ang grupo nila Lenny. Eto naman, bakit magkaiba, balik tayo dun sa sinabi ng mga kabataang in-interview kanina at dito sa slide na pinakita natin, sa inyong palagay, bakit magkaiba ang realidad? Although you touched on that na yung disinformation, no? Magkaiba ang realidad ng halalang ito sa pag-unawa ng mga botante. Itong parang are we living in an alternate reality? Are they living in an alternate reality? Which is the real, which is reality? Does my question make sense?
Yeah.
Can I answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Sige. Prof. Barrios and then Rachel and then Dr.
Yes.
Nick daw, ipopromote na kita.
I think there is a multiverse thing existing here, because if you talk to ordinary people, taxi driver and so on, sasabihin nila kailangan panoorin mo ng mabuti yung mga YouTube at saka mga TikTok tungkol dyan kasi pinapaliwanag doon yung mga nangyayari. So may alternate universe yung ibang kampo where they think the facts are coming from there. And tama ngayon, yung mainstream media is the fake news source according to them, because they were already conditioned that there is a parallel universe of what reality is.
Yeah.
And lahat ng ito madali siyang makita doon sa data mining that I was talking about. Unfortunately, it's very expensive because you really have to spend a lot of resources to acquire the data from Facebook and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Of course, data mining, there's nothing wrong with that. But spreading falsities and myths on social media, what is that punishable? How can we hold these people accountable? I mean, it's done. They're already going to be in power. And that's in addition to your comment, Rachel. You were about to comment on that alternate reality. But can you also comment on how do we, paano ba natin sisingilin tong mga kasinungalingang pinamudmod? Meron bang paraan?
Well, I'm hoping that the lawyers for Lenny will look into that, into the legal aspect, dahil I am not a lawyer. So I really would not want to comment on that. At the same time, kailangan kasi i-trace yung original source, and that will be the tricky part, because what we find in the social media, or what creates big data, is really when this information is shared. And that makes it more complicated to really pinpoint or sino ang kakasuhan. And then to comment on the alternate realities, social media made it very easy because of what we call algorithms. No, you could get trapped in an algorithm where all you see are the fake news, and the real news or the facts don't penetrate into your algorithm. And especially if our networks are very narrow, we only have people of the same mindset, so our worldview is kind of it becomes unreal, in a sense that we are in a multiverse nga ang mangyayari, no? And that's why this information becomes easier to spread. Once you enter a particular network, once they embed themselves in a particular network, then it will generate itself, basically.
Okay, June?
I agree with both, but I think you're right. There's an alternate universe, but I think it's fueled by the fact that, as Dr. Barrios has said, nauna yung kampo ni Bongbong mag-spread nung nila. So na-condition ang minds ng karamihan ng mga tao.
Yes.
So and in fairness to check the fact-checking organizations such as check.ph, they try their best to bring out all those disinformation, all those fake news. Now we've seen a lot, and as we've seen, most of the fake news are against VP Lenny, diba? That's I think the conclusion nung check.ph. And they've been published. Unfortunately, because nauna nang mag-condition ng mind yung Bongbong camp, kahit na anong sabihin mo pa dyan, they won't believe. I mean, you'll be faced with two quote-unquote facts. No? Which do you believe? Pag na-condition ng mind mo, you just believe what you want to believe, so to speak. No?
Yes.
Kasi parang naging loyal na ako dito eh. And unfortunately, that's what happened. As was mentioned earlier by Dr. Barrios, nahunahan tayo. Nahunahan yung grupo ni VP Lenny because late siya mag-decide. Nahunahan na, and you know, this campaign for Bongbong is not only the last year or the last 2 years. This is 6 years in the making. Ang tagal na, they've been planning for this for the longest time. He ran for BP in preparation to run for president this year. So this is
June,
this is
nag-conduct nga ba ang KBP ng exit polls?
No, we did not.
Did you do
Actually, my company, MBC, used to conduct exit polls except this year. And the reason for that is because the use of the exit poll has been limited to a few minutes lang. It's very expensive to conduct exit polls. It costs anywhere from 3 to 5 million. Okay, and the use of that information is only good for like 15 minutes because the pagsara ng polls mo, by the way, you cannot announce the exit polls, the results of the exit polls until after the polls are closed. And within a few minutes from the closing the polls, in our experience, 15 minutes nandiyan na yan. Although this year na-delay ng isang oras, and there's a reason for that. Nagkaroon ng konting aberya dun sa UST. But we didn't make that public. I mean, the Comelec didn't make that public anymore. No? But because it's a minor glitch, the delay ng konti. But theoretically, within like 15 minutes in the past, except this year, lalabas na kagad yan. So useless ang exit polls. Kasi mapipredict mo na from the actual results kung sinong mananalo. Bilis. I mean, this year was extremely fast.
ABS-CBN would invest in exit polls every election. Of course, syempre ngayon wala nang kakayahan na mag-exit.
We did invest in that, Ses. MBC used to conduct exit polls. We have ang total sampling namin mga 35,000 ang sample namin. So they're very predictive.
But you're saying in a quick count na hindi na halos
magamit.
Importante.
Yeah, in fact, I know there's a company that I know a lot of the people in this call are against this group. Yung Publicus did an exit poll, and they made it available to a lot of media, including ourselves. Except that so we were going to announce their results, except that lumabas yung exit poll result nila 8:30. By that time, and we were already announcing the actual results. So useless as far as content is concerned ng exit polls, unfortunately, because napakalit ng windows. But I think in our experience, they're predictive.
Can you allude to that glitch that you said there was a 1-hour delay? I mean, it's not important, but we'd like to know what that glitch was about.
It was.
Did you know about this?
I'm not sure about this, no. Pero kasi as I said, dapat by 7:15 nag-a-announce na tayo. Na-delay ng konti. Because it's like this. The setup is like this. The VCMs are supposed to send the results directly to the transparency server. Okay, that's in UST. Ngayon, the transparency server is supposed to pass that same data to what we call the mirror server. And all of us, yung KBP, yung all the networks, MBC, ABS,
have the mirror server.
We will ang sistema doon, you have a USB, isasaksak mo doon sa mirror, not the transparency, the mirror server. Kukunin mo data and then that's what you tabulate. Okay? So ang nangyari, actually, if you recall, 3 years ago in 2019, there was a 7-hour glitch.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that. We started
we remember.
tabulating at 7:15, nagtatabulate na tayo. And then, after a few minutes, biglang huminto. Hindi gumagalaw yung numbers. Ang nangyari daw doon, there's so much data coming into the transparency server, hindi siya makabato doon sa mirror server. So that's what they're supposed to have solved that problem this year, no? And they did. Unfortunately, meron pa rin konting nangyari na hindi siya bumabato. So ang ginawa nila, minanual muna. And then later on, na-resolve naman yan. Nung na-resolve na, ang bilis naman. In fact, compared to the previous elections, this was very, very fast. By about 10 o'clock, 90% na yung data natin eh. Napakadami na. 90% na. Normally, you reach 90%, siguro madaling araw na yon. But this year was very fast. And I think it was explained by Commissioner Garcia that part it's because of technology. Mas mabilis ang transmission ngayon. Dati kasi mabagal ang transmission ng yung mga cell sites natin or
Okay. Which brings me to the question for Prof. Barrios. Maraming conspiracy theories na lumalabas, masyadong consistent yung pag-transmit, parang hindi nagbago, parang yung distribution was too equal between Bongbong and Lenny. Ano po para masagot na yung mga ganyang mga duda sa ulo ng marami?
Okay, may i-share ako sa inyong Excel file.
Sige.
I made some computation.
Sige po. While you're sharing, kasi yan din ang lumalabas sa mga Q&A. Was there mass cheating involved considering 1,800 VCMs malfunctioned and the votes ratio between BBM was linear? Okay.
Okay. So,
sige po, go ahead.
Ito yon yung linear thing. Kung mapapansin nyo, itong table na to, ito yung part nung nagsi-circulate sa social media. I just captured it here. Okay.
Okay.
So, sa statistics, meron tayong tinatawag na central limit theorem. Ano ibig sabihin nito? Yung mean, habang lumalaki yung sample size, ay lumalapit sa totoong value ng mean. Alright? Now, ang proportion or percentage of vote shared by the candidates is an example of a mean. Alright? So, ito, tiningnan natin yung kasama ito doon sa table na nagsi-circulate sa social media. Meron tayong 1 million nag-send, naging 17 million, naging 22 hanggang naging 36 million. And then for here, ito yung mga corresponding 70% si Marcos, 29% si VP Lenny, 67-32 for each of these number of votes accumulated. So that's a cumulative count, by the way. So itong 1 million, kasama yan dito sa 17 million and so on. Kung sana yung votes na pinag-uusapan natin dito, fresh vote, tapos constant yan, there's something wrong with it. Pero dito kasi cumulative yan. Ngayon, sa statistics, that's possible. That's statistically sound. Hindi yan irregular kasi sabi ng central limit theorem, kung ano yung totoong proportion habang lumalaki yung number of votes that we are counting, nagiging malapit tayo doon sa totoong proportion. So ito, so kunyari, ang totoong proportion ay 32% si VP Lenny, 68% si Marcos. Alright, so base doon sa central limit theorem, kinocompute natin yung range. So kung nasa 1.3 million na yung pumasok na votes, tapos ang totoong vote ni VP Lenny ay 32%, 68% si Marcos. Ang mangyari ngayon ay at 1.3 million, we expect na yung vote ni Marcos will range from 66.64% to 69.36%. Ang kay VP Lenny, 30.64% to 33.36%. Yung doon sa transmission, si Marcos ay naka 70.05%. Medyo mas mataas dito. Okay. Si VP Lenny ay 29.95%. Medyo mababa ng konti dyan. Alright. Pagdating ng 17 million na yung count, okay, so we expect si Marcos will be between 67 to 68%. Si VP Lenny 31 to 32%. Pumasok na ngayon ito yung numbers nila dito sa range that we are talking about.
Okay.
Hanggang sa pagdating dito
so is it clear to everyone?
Pagdating dito sa 36 million, so ang range ngayon ay 67 to 68%. 67.75 yung lumabas. It's within the range that we are expecting according to the central limit theorem in statistics. So statistically, there's nothing unusual with the proportion that is expected as what the central limit theorem is telling us.
Okay. How about, Professor, the VCMs that did not work? Based on percentages, would this be a big number? Would it have affected the outcome?
We need to know how many VCMs exactly malfunctioned. All right. Now, other than this, there's a possibility still na something wrong happened in the course of transmission, because some are doubting why the transmission is so fast. Well, of course, because the technology is improving, we expect transmission to be really fast. And then there were questions, why do we anticipate possible manipulation when in fact before the election, all representatives of the candidates are invited to inspect the machine, to look at the SD cards, to look at the codes that are inserted in, that are placed into the SD cards. Now, there's still a possibility that in the course of the transmission of the data to the transparency server and to wherever it will go, a code, a program can intercept this along the way. That's possible. There's it's technologically possible. Of course, I'm not claiming anything here. However, once we have a cross-check the actual manually counted votes versus the transmitted votes at the precinct level, and we can see discrepancy, then that's a probable cause for further investigation. So the numbers itself, I don't see any, there's nothing statistically that we can say it's unusual. There's no problem with that. Yung consistent na numbers, walang problema yon. But there is still a possibility that something happened in the course of transmission. But the only way for us to verify that is through manual cross-checking with the manual count.
Which is what the PPCRV is doing.
That's right. Although I'm not so
also
clear.
there is that there's also the audit, audit that's being done by COMELEC.
Yeah.
By NAMFREL, random manual audit by NAMFREL.
Random manual audit, correct. By NAMFREL and by COMELEC.
I think PPCRV is going to manually encode 10,000. I'm not sure if this is ballots or precincts. I think it's ballots. Now, ngayon, kailangan nating malaman how the ballots were randomly selected. Kasi yung proportions that we can see from there is not necessarily a reflection of the proportions that we would expect in the transmitted data.
Okay, so that bears watching still, just to set our for us to be at peace with the results.
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
Sorry, yung PPCRV
go ahead,
all COCs. COCs ang binibilang ng ano. What happens kasi is every clustered precinct, di ba? Lahat ng may VCM will print a COC pag close nila. And those are the ones being sent to PPCRV. So PPCRV will count all 107,000 COCs. So 100% yun supposed to be kakount ng PPCRV. Yung NAMFREL is random yon. They will only select a few randomly precincts that they will count. But PPCRV will count all of the COCs, Dr. Barrios.
That will be great.
Okay.
Then it needs for us to see and compare the encoded versus the transmitted data
Yes,
electronically.
yes. That's actually what happens every election since the start of this electronic method that we've done. So and in fact, PPCRB will report if there are any discrepancies. And in the past, we've reported some discrepancies, but very, very minor discrepancies, less than 0.001% ang nare-report ng discrepancy when they do the report.
All right. So let's go back to ano bang reliable, 'di ba, na mga survey kasi against the result of Pulse Asia and SWS, VP Lenny and Kiko's followers were banking on Google Trends that showed seemingly a reverse outcome. And there was also this last-minute survey purportedly, but we could not really look at the methodology, purportedly by UP, Ateneo, and LaSalle professors, I'm not sure professors or alumni, showing that the lead shifted to the camp of VP Lenny. Right?
Yeah.
Would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. With regards to the Google Trends, we could see that there was a big change in terms of statistics in Google Trends from January to April. But then Google Trends cannot replace polling because it only shows interests. So it actually aggregates Google searches that are made by internet users. And by it actually shows, it can tell you the interest, and you could see that ever since they started the rallies, the interest of the public increased. No, the Google Trends dun siya tumaas. So it showed that it was effective in terms of people now were looking at or looking for information about Lenny and Kiko. But at the same time, it does not tell us what kind of information they found. And that's the problem with Google Trends, di ba? We don't know if they were able to get into the sites that were telling truthful information, or they actually found further disinformation. And that's the big problem with Google Trends. That's why it cannot really replace, let's say, opinion polling in terms of determining or predicting elections. But we can see it can be used sa campaign. Campaign managers should have been able to use it to see where the interest was going, because it can be it shows sub-regions where interest was growing. So that's where people could have gone, they could determine where house to house was still needed, or further information could have been pushed with regards the Lenny Kiko campaign. So it's more for helping to push the campaign rather than determining its outcome.
Or could it have been the Lenny camp being in their own echo chamber, just multiplying their own messages, I suppose, or social media posts?
That's possible as well, if because it aggregates it. So it also cannot determine where the searches are coming from. So yes, it could be just one camp doing the searches. But then it's also very hard to do since it aggregates all searches. So it's very hard for one camp to also influence the number of searches. But yes, it could also be pushed that way. And I think in some instances, because of the misunderstanding of Google Trends, that's actually what they tried to do. Yeah.
Prof. Barrios, mabalik ako sa inyo kasi maraming, di ba, tinawag ng false Asia, yung Pulse Asia. Did you feel as a professional, how did you feel about it? About how if the poll doesn't go your way, it's false. I mean, kumbaga parang binaliwala yung minsan yung siyensya na maaaring pumasok dun sa paggawa ng survey?
I cannot say there's something wrong with the methodology of any pollsters in general, because if you look at their websites, the methodology is supposedly statistically sound. So I don't have any problem with that. I think what is the more crucial thing that we should examine here is the coverage of the representatives that they are trying to analyze. And Pulse Asia is open about this, that they were not able to represent A, B, and so on. Okay, and certain demographics, because recent polls surveys outside the country realized that the voting preferences would actually vary depending on socio-demographic profile. Socioeconomic class is just one. Age, gender, location, and many others contributes to the voting preferences, voters' preferences of a candidate. So by not being able to thoroughly represent certain segments of the voting population, there are some questions or issues that we need to look at on the validity of the results. However, kung ako yung doon sa mga sa candidates, sa mga nagka-campaign, I will take it as is and then play on what are the sentiments of those who actually reported in the who were actually covered in the survey, because DE, for example, is the biggest part of the population. So kung ako yung magka-campaign doon, sila yung tatargetin ko kasi ito yung sentiments nila at the moment. So kahit na sila lang yung na-represent doon, I'll make it a point that yung kanilang aspirations ay ibibigay ko sa kanila. So yun yung sa tingin ko magiging take dapat. But hindi kung sino yung nananalo, sino yung hindi nananalo. Kasi yung poll surveys is based on opinion, on perception. And perception can easily change. Kunyari, yung nakita mo lang si VP Lenny na very humble, very honest, or whatever, it will easily change your mind. So yung mga data na nako-collect sa poll surveys, I don't think na it's very stable because it's based on perception. However, it gives us a clue, a direction kung paano dapat natin i-strategize para makuha natin yung sentimento nung nakakarami, which is DE basically.
So are you saying hindi nimble enough yung kampanya nila VP Lenny to mine what those surveys indicated?
Mukhang kulang sa tingin ko.
Yeah.
Rachel nodding.
They could have been using it, pero kulang. Kasi yun na nga, mas tumututok tayo doon sa pagbaliwala ng surveys kaysa sa paggamit ng survey para to our advantage in campaigning.
Yes.
Rachel?
Yeah, I agree. It looks like they started to pay attention to what the surveys were saying and even what Google Trends was saying towards the end of the campaign. They began the campaign. First, they began late, right? Because of the late decision to run. And then they were using, at first, very traditional approaches to campaigning. When the other one had a head start, they never ceased from 2016 onwards. Plus, Cambridge Analytica also had the practice of the Trump campaign. So, they knew what they were getting. They knew what to look for. They knew how to strategize. And so And then even when it comes to the disinformation, one of the things that was kind of frustrating for us in check.ph, we were doing fact checking, but then they left it to us to do the fact checking. Hindi sinagot ng Lenny Camp yung disinformation against them. You know, they let us try to correct it, but then as we said earlier, there was already a mindset that had been placed there by the early social influencers of the other camp. So it was very hard to combat that already. No? So and then sana kung sinagot nila, instead of going that the line, for example, what we were seeing in the polls, that they were saying negativity, of the Lenny camp, they should have already ceased the negativity, or even if everything they were saying was true, maybe that part of showing attempts at historical revisionism and all the tax evasion, they could have left it to the fact checkers and spread the positive message, instead of using, there's a lot of quotes saying that when she's calling BBM a liar, and that actually worked against her, diba? So those things, they should have listened. They should have done more social listening, I think, in their campaign, which was effectively used.
Well,
by the
anyway,
way,
this
by the
is
other camp.
nga.
Yeah.
But okay, we will still have an open forum naman, but ang dami talagang masakit ang loob at because we saw this surge of this groundswell late in the day, but still it's there. So this is my question naman, ano kaya ang gagawin natin, ano ang dapat gawin sa kanila? Dito mo nakikita kasi na kailangan talaga ang planning. Hindi pwede yung parang nag-decide ka lang tapos baka manalo ka biglang ganon, no? But of course, the blame doesn't go naman to VP Lenny for that. It was like she was really forced into it. But how do we harness this volunteerism that came out during the campaign of VP Lenny, and what is the task of the opposition now?
For me, the first thing that should be addressed is based on social listening. We see that there's a lot of acceptance to the historical distortions, historical revisionism. So it's really, as Lenny also said, it's an education crisis. And I think those who started, there were a lot of initiatives on voters' education. I hope na hindi yan overnight initiative, but all those NGO, civil society groups, and even just academic groups who had come together for voters' education, that they continue that until at least for the next 6 years at the very least, so that in the same way that the other camp had harnessed social listening from 2016, let's do that now until for the next 6 years, no? And not put our guard down.
Not pag-election lang, oo. Hindi yung parang susulput ka lang sa election.
Exactly. And I think even for fact checkers, there were several of our members who were doing fact checking, but they were really focused at the time on pandemic fact checking. We only shifted to election-related fact checking in January, while the TikTokings and the YouTube social influencers were already there from 2019. See, so and that was under the radar because it's very hard to track video. So this was going on, and we also came in kind of late.
Okay. You wanted to add more?
No, that's okay. Yeah. No,
okay, so those who are feeling quite depressed can channel their efforts to this advocacy.
Yes.
June.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think what I know natalo tayo, but I think there's something good that happened here. No, to be accurate, I think towards the end, I think the VP Lenny did that. Kaya lang they were attracting a certain socioeconomic class, di ba? Ang daming ano, ang problema yung mga talagang diehard BBM, hindi na ma-convert, talagang nandun na sila eh. But there's a groundswell of a lot of those who were either passive, di ba, or don't care about politics. Now they become politically aware. And I think the social activism that's been generated by the Lenny campaign should be harnessed to for several things. Number one, to correct facts. So itong fact-checking natin, I think should continue. Unfortunately, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. NGOs such as Rachel's group and even traditional media should continue with that. In fact, that's one of our advocacies in the KBP right now. But more than that, I think the activism should continue to make sure that this new government that comes in will do its job properly. In other words, magbabantay tayo ngayon. Dapat that this activism will now be channeled towards making sure that this government does its work properly. Kung meron tayong makitang mga corruption issues dyan, I think those should be brought up right away. And parang babantayin natin itong bagong administration na to. I think that's what should happen. This activism that we've harnessed should continue to do its work in that.
How about mainstream media and traditional media being also demonized and being portrayed as the source of fake news? And how do we combat this?
That actually helped the spread of the disinformation, right? It made disinformation channels, it allowed them to easily come in. Why? Because since 2016, the state players have been trying to undermine the credibility of media. You know, there's been a constant attack on mainstream media.
Yes.
That has also produced a chilling effect on the journalists. No, so for example,
Yes.
what we don't see or what is not being answered by fact checkers like us are actually the troll attacks on journalists who come out with news reports. So and those there are some who, you know, despite all the troll attacks and whatnot threats, they continue to work. But there are several who are, you know, they do self-censorship because they now are afraid of what can happen to them. And then of course there are media owners who I think are the most affected by the chilling effect, because the last thing they want is an ABS-CBN happening to them. No? So and I think that's where the problem lies, and that the media owners themselves are affected or have been chilled in that sense, that they don't want their journalists to be as aggressive as they normally are in terms of covering corruption, in terms of reporting anomalies, etc. And that's the sad part. Now, if there's a public swell of support on media, it will be braver to enable it to do its job. No, but they have to feel, because the media has to feel that the public wants media freedom. No? Sometimes we don't feel that, unfortunately. You know, it's not as strong as in 1986, where people really valued freedom of the press. So I think that's where the ground
because precisely of the attempt to make them to attack them that they're biased, you know. So
yes,
there's a confluence of events.
Right. And disinformation also helps make media look biased, right? That was part of the work of the social influencers, especially on YouTube, those who had already established channels that were co-opted into this campaign. That was one of the strategies, no? To first is to discredit mainstream media. So that's the part.
Okay, there's one. There are several questions here. I'm reading from the Q&A box. One here, I'll try to combine them. Considering the gravity and impact of using AI on the future of our country, it now becomes important to legislate, one, mandating debates and attendance thereof, and aired in national TV to provide Filipino voters a fair and transparent way to discern their candidates. Defining minimum qualifications of our candidates. I'd like you to react to that. But the worry is people without ethics, with money, will hire lawyers and contest it to the Supreme Court. Okay, another question. Sama-samahin nyo na yung pagsagot nito. Do you also attribute the lack of crisis management communication in the part of Lenny's camp that led to negative perceptions during the campaign? Okay, sige. Yan na muna siguro.
Okay.
Shoot.
Yeah. All right. I think that as we said earlier, the campaign came late, while the attempts at disinformation and also the character building of in the Bongbong Marcos camp was already on its way, very effective. They also, in terms of answering all the campaign strategies of Lenny and also some claims, I wanted to bring up the 4 Ds of disinformation that was very much used by the Bongbong Marcos camp that was very effective: to dismiss, distort, distract, and dismay. And it used very effectively by that camp, to dismiss. Sometimes they will just dismiss an allegation as, that's nothing, that's not true.
Or
without
parang
explanation.
kami na nga yung binubuli
kami yung ape.
kami.
Oo, kami yung ape.
Kami.
Oo. Or distort, when what they're guilty of, they blame the other camp. For example, you remember the onions being used for the photoshopped a picture of a rally. So they're guilty of it. They accuse the Lenny camp of doing the same. So that's one. And then distraction, they change the topic, they change the conversation, and if it's not followed through, and that was I think, lacking. They were very passive in answering the distracted. When distraction was used in disinformation, there was a lack of speed in answering that, and they left it to official fact checkers to do that. And then dismay, that this is what is more insidious, because it was the troll attacks against those who, for example, you are from the Lenny camp and you put something on your news feed. There were trolls that would comment viciously on your feed. Whether you're a journalist or an ordinary person, they had people hired to, even within your own network, to badmouth you, or to put up the scripted troll answers. So these were very tactics that we saw that were kind of effective, unfortunately.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to call to join our discussion si Dr. Rowena Reyes, who gave the opening remarks. Please join our discussion and weigh in as I open the floor to questions from our viewers. Please put your questions in the Q&A chat box so I can read your questions. Should we now? Okay, let's also please do weigh in on the results of our Mentimeter poll. So tignan na natin yung ating Mentimeter poll. So the first question is, paano mo ilalarawan ang Philippine national elections? Okay. So there you have it, ang mga malalaki. Bring back Marcos to jail, disappointing, heartbreaking, frustrating, delete TikTok, misinformation, delete Facebook. Okay, any responses? Siguro, Dean, kayo na muna. Since I just brought you into this panel discussion.
Sis. Yeah. Kanina naka-receive ako ng mga messages kasi tanong nila nga, tama nga, masyado tayong na broken-hearted sa nangyari. But listening to everyone now, And I like what June Nikdao is saying, but we have to keep calm really and uh, and take in everything and be calm and be the voice of reason for our students. Otherwise, kung isa-isahin natin kung where we're gonna get our reason to believe in the elections, it might not be enough to just get it from one source. So
or reason to continue to believe in our country.
yes. So we really have to continuously educate our students. I'm sorry, I'm coming from a point of view of a teacher, and I'm seeing so many requests to cancel classes. But really, we have to keep calm and we have to continuously feed them with the right information. Junik daw, thank you. Ang dami mong sinabi na, wait, that's not true. That's not correct. When if only people realize, yes, maybe we came in late in the game. But we have started something big, something social movement, social activism. And I had a conversation earlier with Dr. Gigi Alfonso, and yes, it will take some time for all of us to mature and accept what happened. But coming together and trying to find reasons, explanations, I think kahit papaano, we might be able to mend some broken hearts, but still, we have to dig deeper and read as much as we can so that we'll understand what happened.
Mm-hmm. And the feeling of the youth, we should not let it go to waste. I mean, you know, that the enthusiasm that they had.
That's also our feeling. Yeah, that's also our feeling. Yes.
Yeah. You know, my son does not want to have kids because of the outcome of the
Maybe our kids are friends because that's exactly their lines, really. They see things different now, so we have to really be careful also what we put out there.
What we tell them, yes. And
sometimes it's not us, it's just that what's out there. I heard one resource person saying that they were in a pandemic lockdown for 2 years, and what's their source? Right? They don't read traditional media, it's just social media. So I mean, I think it's really just strengthening our call for media information literacy for our students, really. And to explain, and not just, when they say something to us and give our personal stuff, but to explain both the left and the right, I mean the good and the bad, so that they really fully understand.
Right. Let's bring back the first image. And yes, okay. Prof. Barrios, gusto nyo mag-comment? Prof. Barrios.
Ang masasabi ko lang, yan din yung nasa sentence ko.
So, tugma.
At saka nung anak ko din. Yan din yung kanyang iniisip.
Oo nga, so lahat tayo, kailangan nating maging busy at hindi malulong sa depression. You know, we cannot be paralyzed by this. Okay, let's go to the next page. Oh, June, want to give us more words of wisdom and inspiration?
Actually, yung first yun, lahat tayo, we agree with that. Although in my case, I knew that was going to happen because it's related to this one. Because as I said earlier, we were doing our own polling. We did 4 pre-election surveys, and I appreciate what Dr. Barrios said kanina, no. But yung sampling namin, Dr. Barrios, was pretty random. We hired an expert to do our sampling, and we covered the entire country. But you're right. Pag nag-survey kami, we kind of simulate parang election talaga. We came up with some kind of a ballot, and we just asked we did it, ang consultant namin identified randomly some region, some probinsya, some town, some barangay, and then we start with a certain place, and then we count number 5. So it's really random, no? So papakita lang namin, and they just check who they vote for. It's like simulating a an election, no? So it was very predictive of the results, no? Nakita namin, as I said, si Bongbong nung nagsanib puwersa ni sila ni Sara, ang unang survey namin nasa 49% na siya agad eh. Tapos ang trend niya pataas. We were hoping nakakain si Lenny dun sa share ni Marcos. Hindi eh. Marcos continued to go up because he was running as we said, a good campaign. But so did VP Lenny. VP Lenny started with 8.3%, in fact, no? Umakyat siya 16.2, naging 21, naging 24, and then ultimately, as we saw, naging 28% siya. That's the final share niya, about 28%. So both of them are on an upward trajectory. And it was, I think the polls were really very kind of predictive of what was going to happen. That Marcos will win by a landslide because he continued to gain, instead of losing followers, he continued to gain. Although VP Lenny also gained by even a big number, no? Nag-gain si VP Lenny ng more than from 8.3 naging 28% siya. So naka 20% ang gain niya. Si Marcos unfortunately continued to gain. So from 49 sa amin naging 58 pa nga siya, di ba? So nag-gain siya ng mga 9%. Lenny gained more, but unfortunately Marcos
not enough.
Hindi siya nakakat into the Marcos, nag-gain pa nga si Marcos. Ang nangyari, both of them gained from the others. Nag-implode si Isko. Even si Ping Lacson, wala na. I think hindi nga naka 1 million si Ping Lacson. There was a lot of hope at the outset for Ping. But all of them, I think yung mga siguro mga undecided didn't go for those that had no chance of winning anyway. So,
here's an interesting comment, and I think also this is a time for self-examination, where we did wrong so that, we can do better next time. So agree or disagree. Everyone is talking about misinformation and BBM's lies, not realizing that their problem is how the two camps manage perception. Leaders are the ones who set examples for their followers. BBM chose to pull off Sun Tzu's art of war by keeping silent all the time and letting the kakampings explode out of irritation. The result is that many kakampings resorted to educating, in quotation marks, people with arrogance, giving people facts when the class C2D didn't even need it. These people need kindness, which a lot of kakampings failed to represent by succumbing to their passionate hate for BBM. The perception they gave to the mass is arrogant, elitist, and promoters of cancel culture, which is psychological. Kakampings fell into the dirty trap of the dictator's son. So VP Lenny could have pulled off Selena Gomez's tactic. She called out her fans when she noticed they were becoming hurtful to other people. This commenter would like to say, I voted for VP. But, really a time to really examine also. Hard self-examination. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I said earlier that VP Lenny should have let others explain that why he is a liar, why there's this, she should have kept silent. Yeah, not herself. Because it became we're trying to get away from the personality war, which she reinforced unwittingly by some of her comments. Which because of the very good research on the other camp, they knew how to avoid, and he can easily deny it since it was all his people doing all the dirty work, he can easily say it wasn't me, so and that's where I think the shortfall in terms of understanding what people were thinking,
communication,
the communication of the messages fell apart.
Okay, yung debate, obviously hindi na necessary, ganun ba? Should we legislate debates, require it of our candidates? Prof. Barrios, do you want to weigh in?
Siguro kailangan kasi dito natin talaga makikita yung yung totoong plataforma ng mga kandidato. Kasi kamukha sa mga senators, anong maaasahan natin kung hindi natin alam kung anong balak gawin nitong mga to sa Senate? So I think legislation is important, pero sila din yung nandun. So who will initiate the legislation? So parang paikot-ikot lang.
Katawa-tawa. Mga for sure dominated nilang Congress, 'di ba?
Nabanggit
Why? We
kanina
should still insist. Doesn't mean na patalo na tayo, 'di ba?
Nabanggit mo
June.
kanina.
I'm sure it was sorry, go ahead, Prof.
Nabanggit mo kanina yung tungkol sa AI and ethics and so on.
Okay.
Sa palagay ko, it's about time that we revisit and update the Data Privacy Act, kasi dito papasok ito yung mga ganitong usapin eh. So I think it's about time that we update the Data Privacy Act. So somebody at least in the Senate should champion the cause for looking into the ethical aspect of artificial intelligence in general.
So we should take on the big players, Facebook, Google.
Yes.
We should, no?
Yeah.
We should challenge them. Can we?
No, pwede kasing pwedeng wala akong masyadong alam dyan. Kasi pwedeng at the country level, merong mga specific guidelines kung ano yung mga pwede, ano yung hindi pwede. Which can be part of the Data Privacy Act.
Any thoughts on that, Rach?
I would be cautious on anything that requires legislation because it can be used against the good, especially when you distrust the government that's sitting. They're already talking about constitutional change as early as now, and it's a scary thing that after we fought for the 1987 Constitution, that it could be, it could just be changed overnight. No? So while there are solutions that should be looked into, I don't want to jump the gun and say this legislation or laws or rules are the solution there. No? I think we have to look for a middle ground. Perhaps also the continuing talks with, for example, I see already some positives in terms of the applications like Meta looking at coordinated misinformation that's they're doing something, but I think they should do more in that regard. That's where AI can come in because you can trace coordinated messaging. So that's one area that can be further looked into, and I think we have to explore others, but I would step back when it comes to laws.
Legislation. Here is an interesting question and observation from JC Kui. Legacy media failed in its mandate with little airtime and corporate influence. That content is biased and sometimes sanitized or watered down. How can legacy media be more nimble and have more teeth to address pressing issues without bias and filter?
Si June yan, dapat legacy media.
June. Legacy media. Parang, mukha daw tayong commercial, mga ganon. Oy, wala na ako sa legacy media.
No, actually, between, I know that there's been a lot of criticism about, and we have to admit, you cannot legislate what your anchor people or news people will say. No? Sometimes they have their own biases. But there is a mechanism, at least in the KBP, for addressing that. Meron kaming doon. If you have a complaint against any station or any or any announcer or any reporter, you can actually complain, and that's going to be acted upon. No, so I understand the sentiment, but I think compared to between legacy or traditional media, at least in the traditional media, there are ombudsmen, there are self-regulatory structures that addresses certain concerns about legacy media. Compare that with the digital media. Digital media is anarchy. Anyone can be a broadcaster, anyone can be a blogger, and they can say anything. Walang responsibility, walang accountability, di ba? So you can say anything, and nobody will sanction you. That's the problem with digital media, and and we're trying to kind of with the group like check.com, even us, we're trying to point out those kinds of disinformation. That's a lot more needs to be done, because we're dealing with so many bloggers, so many broadcasters in digital media out there that can actually do a lot of damage. No,
I think, June, the failure of ABS-CBN to get its franchise, plus the legal troubles of Maria Ressa, have really led legacy media to be in fear.
Yeah.
The long and short answer is yes.
Yes.
At least for broadcast, says no. And
I heard, is it true, June? Supposedly, hindi ba may claim ang mga pamilya Marcos sa isang network dyan? Baka
Yes.
daw buhayin nila.
We heard about that.
You heard it, huh?
Well, that's been a long. I mean, that rumor or information has been known since the Marcos left. Alam natin that one of the big networks is supposed to be owned by Aimida and so forth. I don't know what will happen to that. If I asked a question from Bobby Barrero the other day, because he was with that network before, diba? And he mentioned that there's some truth to that now as to what will happen with the return of the Marcoses. I don't know what will happen if they will reclaim ownership of that, because medyo magiging garapal yan, and you're opening up your the ill-gotten issue again, because so I don't know what will happen to that.
Okay, now let me bring in some more comments from our participants and audience. Odeline Avicilia, Ma'am says the crisis management communication of BBM is a strategy of Trump. Watch, our brand is crisis. That is the same campaign strategy they use. Any comment? Rachel?
I think I already mentioned it earlier about the 4Ds, no? The dismiss, distort, distract, and dismay, which they used it to a maximum effect. So yeah, that would be my comment. And they're going to continue using that, I think, to sustain the next 6 years. So actually, what we should be doing is, as Ma'am Rowena had said earlier, to increase media literacy. And perhaps historical literacy as well, So these are the things that we should be looking into in the next 6 years.
Okay, this one addressed to Ma'am Neni and Dean Barrios. Tony D. Igcalinos. Have schools of communication, notably CMC, considered revisiting their curriculum and see how adjustments can be made to address disinformation in the long term? The School of Statistics Data Science program is a good partner for a consortium with media conglomerates taking active part.
Okay, on the part of the University of the Philippines, the College of Mass Communication has continually been looking at its various curricula and adopting new courses. Regarding this information, Professor Khan right here can tell you about what the journalism department has done. And in the communication research department, where I was once connected with, there is a particular program that addresses social media and measures, social media misuse and disuse. And lastly, on the part of collaborating with other institutions, whether within the university or outside it, the University of the Philippines has been very, very aggressive in doing that. Check.ph is just one example of them. I can name a few more, but then I will take more time. And then lastly, about artificial intelligence. We in the university are looking particularly at that and looking at the ethical considerations for this. Pretty soon, we will have a center, that will study artificial intelligence. That by itself is not just a physical center, it will also be a cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary center, which which crosses the arts, engineering, the sciences, and of course the social sciences. Thank you.
Wonderful. Ayan, that's so much to look forward to. Dapat mag-aral ulit yung mga nandyan sa legacy media. Di ba, June? Anyway, we have time for one last question and we'll make this a fast round for everyone on the panel. Okay, here it is. If there's one thing you can change to improve the national elections, I would have wanted to ask the one about Robin Padilla leading the senatorial race as compared to Chel Jokno, who is in number
27.
15 ba? 16? Siguro yun muna bago ano. And because the survey failed to track that. Prof. Barrios or Rachel, would you like to comment? Bago yung last question. Sige.
I think Robin was in the top 12.
Si Professor Barrios.
I think Robin in the surveys was in the top 12 naman. Papasok talaga siya.
Number 1 ngayon.
Oh, yeah, I know. But diba? A lot of, we've seen similar happenings in the past. No, for example, Grace Poe. Nung tumakbo si Grace Poe senator, nobody predicted her to be number 1. She was, in fact, at the start, nasa number 22 yata siya eh. And then, nung magbago mag-eleksyon, pumasok siya sa top 12. But nobody predicted her to be number 1. I think, pagdating sa election, either, siguro yung sampling natin, hindi natin nakukuha yung mga CD. I don't know what happened. No? But in the case of Robin, maraming nag-hazard nung guess bakit biglang umakyat si Robin ng ano. Kasi in-endorse daw siya ni Duterte at the last minute. So,
okay. Prof. Barrios?
Yung si Tulfo has been consistently number 1 in the survey naman, di ba? Bumagsak number 3. I think it's a combination of the fact that Lauren really spent a lot of money in the campaign. Number 2, hindi siya endorsed ng Si Tulfo was not endorsed by Iglesia. I think if Tulfo got 2 million from
those factors came into play.
Hindi siya nag-number 1 because hindi siya Iglesia endorsed. But I think in the case
Prof.
of Robin,
Marius,
because a lot of people are saying it's because the president endorsed him. That shows you malakas pa rin endorsing power ni presidente. I mean, for him to be able to get Tolentino and Bato and win as senators, I mean that shows you how influential his endorsement is. No?
Okay. Prof. Barrios?
Siguro isa lang may idadagdag ko, yung underdog ng mga Pilipino na kung sino yung underdog and perceived to be inaapi ay siya yung pinapaboran. Kasi everybody's talking about anong gagawin niya doon and so on. Although yun na nga yung popularity, endorsement and so on work, nandun na siya. But being number 1, I think nakuha niya yung puso ng masang Pilipino na yung underdog ang papaboran natin.
Okay. So in closing, for all 4 of you, rather, ano ang gusto nyong palitan para mapabuti, to improve our elections? Quick round. Rachel?
I think that rather than, I saw some comments dun sa Q&A regarding MIL. No? I don't think that we should depend on the DepEd, neither for teaching history nor for teaching MIL. But what we have to do now is to train the teachers, whether even if it's outside class seminars on helping public school teachers and even private school teachers teach these two courses, so that we could help more people understand really what's going on and not fall for the disinformation that's happening on TikTok or YouTube. I think that's a starting point. But a lot more has to be done. That's for me.
I'm sorry, I suddenly lost my connection. Prof. Barrios?
Siguro kung merong papalitan, try to put more regulatory policies on the conduct of surveys, kasi may possibility din kasi na yung mga surveys will lead to the a bandwagon and so on and so forth. So kailangan yung design, yung methodology ng surveys follows a certain guidelines, maybe by professional organizations, which is what they're trying to do in Australia now. They're trying to formulate guidelines. Ito yung mga dapat natin gawin. This should be the basic requirements of a valid survey designed for poll surveys and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Prof. Barrios. June, and then si Dean Rowena Reyes naman after you.
Ses, may disclaimer muna ako. This is the opinion of June Nicdaw, not of the network.
Okay. Sige,
okay.
sige.
But anyway, I think ang pinaka-pet peeve ko dun sa, well, we've discussed a lot about, the disinformation and all that, and I think that's been discussed enough. No? But ang pinaka-pet peeve ko dito sa election and for our political system is the issue of dynasty. I think kung anong papalitan, I think it's already in the Constitution. I think there should be an enacting law to really implement anti-dynasty. I mean, makikita mo ngayon, it's a farce, no? There's supposed to be anti-dynasty, pero palit lang ng palit. It's not the same person, but it's the same family, no? In fact, ang daming parang ginawang enterprise and politics. I think that's number one that needs to be done. In fact, if you look at the history of the Philippines, nasira tayo ang trajectory ng Pilipinas nung Marcos decided to perpetuate himself in power. Unfortunately, VP Lenny didn't If you recall, the Philippines was number 2 only to Japan panahon ni Marcos. And because we did not continue that cycle of selecting leaders properly, corruption crept in, and look where we are right now. We're na-overtake na tayo, pati Vietnam yata, Laos, mauna pa sa atin. And unfortunately, that's what happened. It's all about perpetuating people in power. That's the anti-dynasty thing. The Constitution provides for it, but hindi na implement. I don't know if that's going to be if our legislators, because sila mismo ang impacted dito, no? And that, in fact, that's a policy of VP Lenny. Only one person in the family runs. But as you can see now, there will now be 2 Villars in the Senate. There will be 2 Cayetanos in the Senate. There will be 2 Estradas in the Senate. My God, I mean, this is going to be...
And the provinces,
I know,
cities.
Exactly. Lahat.
Mayor, vice mayor, magkapatid,
Oo.
mag-anak, hindi. Ay, nako.
Yes, from the lolo
Maraming
to the,
salamat,
to the
June.
grandson, sila lang yon. Our political situation is not going to change unless we actually implement that anti-dynasty provision in the Constitution properly. That's number one. Of course, the others are debates. I agree we should legislate debates. And on the issue of yung AI and all that, mahirap yung legislation, but I think we can work with the private social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and all that. I think we can work with them so that they can they can have better governance especially when it comes to a certain extent nag-agree naman sila, but I think there's a lot more to be done with that. I think that's what I have to say now.
Baka we can focus our efforts there, yung mga kabataan.
Sure, yeah.
Baka pwede sila doon mag-focus ng efforts nila. Okay, Dean Reyes.
I have two things. One is, as I said earlier, MIL, Media Information Literacy. And second is, siguro yung voters education. I'm guilty. I started just a year ago. But if we had it, a constant, then perhaps mas merong tayong impact na naggawa sa ating mga estudyante. So, yun. MIL and voters education. Every year, not just a year before the election, it should be there. It should be constant. It should be strong. Thank you.
The fight is just beginning. We thank you very much. We thank very much all our speakers. I know this is a very hectic season for all of you. You had to overcome as well your depression and the sadness. We appreciate that you have shared your wisdom in our webinar today. We're now sharing the evaluation poll results, and as expected, a great percentage of our viewers have given very high marks for our panel. So ayan po ang mga questions na sasagutin ninyo. There are 5 questions, and these are the choices for each question: strongly agree, agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. So the first question, the panelists demonstrated thorough knowledge of the topic. The panelists were able to properly organize their thoughts in answering questions posed by the participants. The panelists spoke clearly and audibly. The panelists used appropriate language with technical jargons adequately explained, and the panelists contributed to the perspectives and knowledge on post-election analysis. Okay, as mentioned earlier, we're now launching our post-test so you can assess your progress in knowledge and understanding acquired from this webinar. Okay, so that will be also on your screens. At this point, we will keep the post-test open in the background as we proceed with our program. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you the President of the Philippines Communication Society and the Vice President for Public Affairs of the University of the Philippines System to give the synthesis and closing remarks. Please welcome Dr. Elena E. Pernia.
Thank you very much, Ces, and thank you to our resource persons here. At this 10th episode of our National Forum series on communication and democracy, had our resource persons unpack campaign dynamics, polling and voting trends, importantly, the aftermath of our national elections. 2 days after our national polls, anyare is the question in the minds of many voters and observers of Philippine elections. This year's Philippine elections had the highest turnout of voters, with 65.7 million Filipinos casting their votes. It was also the fastest in transmitting election returns. However, there are reports of voters having had to wait 5, 6, even up to 12 hours before they successfully casted their votes, and also reports about the possible disenfranchisement of about 1.1 million voters due to anomalies and irregularities such as 1,800 vote counting machines breaking down or malfunctioning, delayed or non-replacements of SD cards, and the absence of technicians in the precincts. The COMELEC, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and the Philippine National Police characterized last Monday's election as generally peaceful and safe, despite reports of intimidation, red tagging, violence, and failure of elections in certain areas of the country. COMELEC spokesman admitted such incidents but called them isolated. And comparing this year's elections with the 2019 midterm elections, the AFP said it monitored only 15 election-related violence nationwide compared to 60 such incidents in 2019. It is against that background that we had our last webinar. It began with Far Eastern University's Institute of Arts and Sciences Dean, Dr. Rowena Reyes's wise words. How do you mend a broken heart? She asked. She rightfully recommends participation in a forum like this afternoon's discussion to understand what happened, to gain insight on what are trustworthy sources of information. I agree with Dean Weng that a thorough understanding of political communication, ethical, political campaigning is what our students of communication and media need. Thank you, Dean Weng, for pointing out how important it is for us Filipinos to continue moving forward with this new formed social movement. Our moderator, Ces Oreña Drilon, then engaged our resource persons, Professor Erniel Barrios, who is with the School of Statistics, the UP School of Statistics, Professor Rachel Khan of the UP College of Mass Communication and project coordinator of Check.ph, and Ruperto Dicdao Jr., president of Manila Broadcasting Company and the chair of the KBP, in a roundtable discussion. Victor Andres, or Dindo Manhit, who is founder and managing director of StratBase, who was supposed to be with us this afternoon, but unfortunately, his father passed away. Our condolences to him and his family. Dindo shared with us several slides, a couple of which were used by CES to jumpstart the roundtable discussion. I will do my very best to synthesize the main points, but my strong advice to you viewers is to review this episode, which will remain available in the TVUP YouTube channel. 1. Did survey results correctly predict the partial and unofficial vote counts for the presidential, vice presidential, and senatorial races? The answers are both yes and no. There is no evidence that the methodology of credible survey groups are questionable. Secondly, the campaign team of winning candidates Marcos and Duterte did a good job of selling the brand unity, using survey data to define the winning combination of Marcos and Duterte. Thirdly, their effective public relations campaign integrated disinformation strategies. One evidence of this are the data showing the disconnect between what voters saw as essential values of a leader and the characteristics of the winning presidential candidate, Mr. Bongbong Marcos. Fourthly, this year's winning presidential campaign showed the utility of data mining strategy or investing on big data from the social media to extract insights which are then used to create and share disinformation and content that can be seen in hyper-partisan websites, Facebook pages, and various social media accounts. This strategy is data-driven. It is scientific, but these are used to condition the minds of voters. Winning candidate Marcos had an early start in using these data mining strategies. And unfortunately for losing candidate Robredo, the campaign used them too late. TikTok, in fact, now is the propagandist's new campaign tool to win elections. Fifthly, the successful creation of an alternate universe, was important, because these are the ones that contain the misinformation. The algorithms of social media created traps, created this fake news universe. Number 6, Is there basis for the groups protesting the 2022 election results? Was there mass cheating involved, considering the difference between Marcos and Robredo being linear? From Professor Barrios, we learn about the central limit theorem in statistics, and that nothing is unusual with the proportion. It is as expected. Number 7, however, there is a possibility that in the course of transmission of data to the transparency server, there could be, that could be where the distortion lies. A code could capture the data. But this may be revealed, if it happens, by the random manual audit of NAMFREL and the manual encoding of COCs by the PPCRV. Evidence of anomalies will be in when you compare the results of the manual count and the COMELEC's random audit with the data that have already come in. The 8th point, malapit na. Google Trends cannot replace polling as it measures interest. People looking for information, is what Google Trends can track, but it cannot track the kind of information that they find. There is no way to determine if the information that these individuals seek and find are verifiable information or are actually disinformation. Google Trends can show where interest is in order to push the campaign rather than predict election outcomes. Unfortunately, and this is the 9th point, the camp of VP Robredo was not nimble enough in using Google Trends and survey information for their campaign purposes, nor did they address the false information and historical revisionism early enough. I'd like to end with some lessons and ways forward still coming out of the discussions this afternoon. Base sa mga leksyon ng halalan, klaro ang mga kailangan gawin ng COMELEC para sa susunod na mga eleksyon. Number 1, we need new machines para walang breakdown. Pangalawa, these machines must be tested before election day. And thirdly, COMELEC must anticipate anomalies and problems coming out of vote buying, the simple lack of pens and secrecy folders, the closure of precincts even before 7 p.m., the presence of armed police inside polling places, and the spread of false information, sometimes by government officials themselves. And then, para sa ating lahat, tayong mga mamamayan, ano ang kailangan nating tugunin at gawin? Number 1, regarding false information, particularly historical revisionism, we should advocate for continuing fact-checking, fight historical revisionism, correct the whitewashing. Importantly, address those of us who are in the academe, address the educational crisis that begins in our basic education. Pangalawa, bantayan natin ang ating bagong gobyerno. Be watchful against corruption. Number 3, we should all understand and talk about artificial intelligence and privacy issues. In fact, there must be somebody to champion data privacy, champion the cause for ethical artificial intelligence. Fourthly, support our free press. The non-renewal of the ABS-CBN franchise, the harassment and attacks on journalists and conventional mass media resulted in a chilling effect, resulted in self-censorship, and all of these contributed to the rise of disinformation. There must be a public swell of support for media so that our journalists and our media owners become braver. Panglima ko, mahalin natin ang ating bayan. Pagtibayin natin ang ating tiwala sa proseso ng demokrasya. Patuloy tayong magpakita ng malasakit at kumilos tayo para sa kapwa natin. Nasabi na nga na ang namulat hindi na muli pipikit. Hindi natin kailanman hahayaang makatulog muli ang pag-asang magising. This webinar is the last in the series of the Philippines Communication Society's National Forum on Communication and Democracy. On behalf of the PCS and the UP system, I thank our moderator and resource persons today and in the 9 previous webinars, and especially you, our audiences, our dear communication and media students, faculty, and professionals. Please watch these webinars again because these are indeed educational resources, not just for those in communication and media, but more importantly for the general public, para sa patuloy na pagmulat nating lahat. Pumunta lamang kayo sa tvup.ph at bisitahin ang YouTube channel ng TVUP. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Patuloy nyo kaming sundan dito sa Philippines Communication Society, www.philscomsoc.org. Maraming salamat muli at magandang hapon.
Maraming salamat. Can you hear me? Maraming salamat, Dr. Elena Pernia. Napakaganda ng sinabi nyo at medyo naibsan ang sama ng loob ng marami sa atin. I'm sorry, my AirPods bumigay na sa katagalan ng ating webinar. As you can see, we will be showing on your screens the post-test results. There has been a distinct increase in knowledge and understanding of the issues based on the post-test results. Those who have actively participated will get the most out of this interactive program. As mentioned, this is the 10th and last webinar of the National Forum on Communication and Democracy, Philippine Elections 2022. Please stay tuned for updates on upcoming projects and activities in the PCS website or Facebook page. If you would like to watch this or all the other previous webinars in playback, all the webinars in this series will be available for viewing at your convenience at the TVUP YouTube channel. This formally closes the National Forum on Communication and Democracy, Philippine Elections 2022. Ako po si Ces Orenia Drilon on behalf of the Philippines Communication Society. Let us strengthen our country's democratic foundations through communication. Mabuhay ang bansang Pilipinas. Mabuhay po kayong lahat at ituloy po. Let's continue the good fight. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.